Hi everyone, and welcome to the Say As It Is with Pete podcast series. I'm Pete, your host, and each week I will bring you some frank and honest conversations covering various topics from learning and development, apprenticeships, funding, HR, strengths, recruitment, ESG, well-being, ED&I, employability, and much, much more. So let's get this week's episode underway and say as it is. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Say As It Is with Pete. And as always, I'm your host Pete, and here is another episode of Say It Is with Pete. Now, some people have asked, this is a bit of a welfare check-in to be honest, because some people are reaching out to me saying, are you still doing your podcasts? Yes, I am. I'm a little bit slow behind them. I have been going non-stop for the last few weeks at work, so it's just had a little bit of an impact on me getting these done. But never say the least, here we go. So this week's episode, I'm going to be looking at the full picture of what has changed in terms of the Employee Rights Bill. So some of you may have heard that there's something called the Employee Rights Bill 2026 that's coming out. And the Employee Rights Bill is bringing a lot of changes, and I mean a lot of changes. And mainly it's good for the employee, not so great for the employer. So there are some ups and downs to it. So most of the changes come into effect from the 6th of April 2026. And that's really the first round of changes that are coming. And then the next round will be in October 2026. So these things are coming thick and fast. And the interesting thing is from my perspective, not a lot of people have been getting ready for it. Not a lot of people or employers are paid attention. They're only now thinking about, oh my God, it's coming. Some employers have been thinking how to get out of it or what's the work around. And unfortunately, there is no work around on this. So I think the best thing to do is, as we always do, have an honest, frank conversation. So let's get that proper conversation about what has actually changed or what is due to change in this month, April 2026, because there's a lot of noise out there. And if we're honest, a lot of it only tells half the story. And if you're following Instagram, TikTok and stuff, you only see bits and pieces. So what we are seeing right now is not just a few updates in employment law, but we're going to be kind of seeing a lot. So it's what you're seeing is what we see, right? So this is the first phase of a much bigger reform that is reshaping how employment works in the UK. And if you only look at the headline changes, you will miss the real impact. So this is not just about giving employees more rights. It's about shifting a balance of responsibility, increasing accountability, and also focusing organisations to operate in a more structured, consistent and transparent way. So they can't get away with things anymore. And the most important thing to understand is that this doesn't kind of live in policy documents. It lives in how managers behave every single day. So the difference is now it's just things are just a policy and a document and a process and a procedure. Well, guess what? Not anymore. It's a day-to-day thing. So to understand this properly, you have to start with the direction of travel, right? So for years, employment rights in the UK were based on the idea that you had to earn them, right? You have to work to earn them to be entitled to get those rights. So you built up service, you provided your commitment, and over time you gained access to protections. So this model created gaps, particularly for people in the lower paid roles and for new starters and those working in more kind of operational environments. And it didn't really help because there's so much that is against employees and for employers, but now the government has switched, which is really interesting. So what has changed now is that the rights are being brought forward. So the system is moving towards kind of day one protection rights. And that sounds simple, right? But it has very real consequences. When the rights move earlier, responsibility moves earlier. So employers are now expected to manage situations from employers are starting to manage situations from the very beginning of employment that previously would not have arisen until much later. So that is where the real pressure begins, because a lot of things are, you have to be here so long, or so many days, or so many weeks, months, or years before something actually comes in, and you can use protection, or for like, you couldn't take paternity, you weren't in right to maternity rights for when you join, you have to wait 3-4 days until you get paid for sickness, all these kind of things. So a lot of it is being changed and coming in from day one. And there are a lot of companies out there that are ready, and there's a lot of companies that are not. So one of the most significant changes, and one that will have a daily operational impact, is the reform to statutory sick pay. Oh yeah, statutory sick pay is getting a massive overhaul. So previously, as we all know, there was either a 3 or 4 day waiting period before sick was paid, and employees earning earning below a certain threshold were expected. Sorry, I've just got a bit distracted there by something. So sorry, I'll go with Craig back on. This happens, it's live. We're doing the recordings, right? So, so before sick pay was paid, you had to wait kind of 3 or 4 days, and employers or employees earning below a certain threshold were excluded entirely. So that created a situation where some employees came to work unwell because they couldn't afford not to, while others had no access to support at all. So you had that mix. It was a 50-50. If you were below the threshold, then tough. You wouldn't get fuck all, right? But if you were at the threshold or above, you had a waiting period. So if you were sick for 3 days and then you went back to work, well, you lost 3 days pay, right? Not great. So it had an impact, and it has an impact on us. Well, guess what? From Monday, the 6th of April, 2026, sick pay is now payable from the first day of absence, and eligibility has been widened. Or it has, even for the lower earners. Yeah. So this is a clear move towards fairness and well-being. So employees are no longer penalised immediately for being unwell, and lower paid workers are now included in a system they were previously excluded from. So now, if you're sick, and you get paid statutory sick pay from day one. So, however, the operational impact is going to be significant. So every absence now carries an immediate cost to the employer. Okay, and more employees are eligible. So in the real world, for example, such in my sector like hospitality, if a team member goes sick, this means that 1 day absence that previously may not have been or may not have triggered costs in any way now does. So multiply that across a workforce, and that the financial impact becomes clear to the employer. But more importantly, it increases visibility. Absence becomes something that must be actively managed, not passively accepted. So what is that going to mean? Well, this is where management capability becomes critical, and all managers and leaders need to step up and get this right. So if, for example, supervisors are not confident in holding return to work conversations, or managers, identifying patterns and documenting appropriately, issues will surface quickly. So the law does not create poor management, but it exposes it, right? So, what you've got to do is make sure that you're recording it correctly. And if team members don't know how to do return to work, so if managers or supervisors have to do, or should now be doing, return to work interviews, and you have to document everything. So mind you, a lot of this has to now be documented. And there's a reason why, and I'll explain what comes in 2028, I think it is, or 27 or 28. But what comes out in a minute. But you have to document everything. So return to works must be documented, okay? Because you've got to look at those number of absences, and the number of times, and the frequency, and the occasions, okay? So when we look at that, as we say, it's it's got to be managed correctly. So this is where, as I say, management capability becomes critical in all aspects. So alongside this, we see a major shift in family-related rights as well. So paternity leave and unpaid parental leave are now available from day one of employment. That's again another day one right. So not only is statutory sick pay coming from day one, but family related rights. So paternity leave and unpaid maternity, not maternity. Pete, I get my words out and I've got to read my writing. So let me get this right. Let's recap. So statutory sick pay from day one. And alongside this, the family related rights, which is paternity leave and unpaid parental leave. So paternity leave and parental leave are now available from day one of employment. So previously, employees needed to build up service before qualifying for paternity or parental leave. Okay, so this now has going to have a big impact, and the barrier for parental and paternity leave has been removed. So it's now gone. It's a day one right. So happy days. So for employees, this provides kind of that immediate security and reflects the reality of modern working life, which is a good thing, right? So for employers, sorry guys, this is where it kind of kicks you. It changes the timing of responsibility. So these conversations no longer happen once someone is established. They can happen during onboarding or while in the first few weeks of employment. So the whole ball game changes. It's not you have to wait so long. It's coming from day one. So employers, be prepared. So in practice, this means that managers must be prepared to handle these situations early as possible. So if one manager supports a request and another rejects it due to a misunderstanding or lack of knowledge, inconsistency is created, right? So that inconsistency is where risks begin. So not necessarily legal risks immediately, but employee relation risks, which often leads to escalation. So it's key that there should have been some training around this. So managers, leaders, CEOs, COOs, directors, chairmen, whoever you are out there as the employer, you better pull your socks up because you should know this already. And if you don't, go back to your HR department and ask them why they've not updated you, why they haven't told you these things. Because guess what? When you're sitting in a boardroom and you're discussing the high increase of sick pay and why now all these people are for paternity and unpaid parental leave, you need to ask why they didn't tell you. Because if you're in the dark, you're in the dark. But you should not assume that you know everything, because even with these rights, things are still changing. So there's another key development, and this is also the introduction of bereaved parents leave. So what this does is this provides significant leave for individuals who loses a partner within the first year after having a child. So this is less about volume and more about impact. And it reflects a recognition that employment law must account for a deeply human situation or situations. So in reality, it is not something that can be managed purely through policy. It requires judgment, empathy, and leadership. So if an employee experiences such a loss, the way the organisation responds will define trust, not just for that individual, but also for the wider team. And this is where culture becomes kind of visible and also valuable. So for a legal risk perspective, one of the most significant changes is the increase in penalties for failing to follow correct collective redundancy processes. Okay, so the maximum protective award has doubled from 90 days pay to 180 days pay per affected employee. So this is a clear signal that process matters. So let's pause for a minute. Okay, and let's just recap what we've gone through, because it's quite a lot, right? So sick pay is now a day one right from day one. So if you go sick one day, you get paid, but paid at statutory sick pay. And the statutory sick pay payment has gone up a bit, so it's a little bit better. Paternity and unpaid parental leave is a day one right. Yeah. Bereavement leave for a parent who loses a lot, like their partner, in the first year of their child's birth, that's a day one right, and that's up to 52 weeks of leave. So be aware of that one. And now we're looking at redundancy. So if you don't get the redundancy or correct, as it says there, if the organisation rushes a redundancy process and fails to consult properly, it could result in, instead of being 90 days pay, it could be 180 days pay. So it's about getting it right. So although these changes are coming in, you've got to make sure you follow the process correctly. And this is where a lot of employers are going to be caught out, because they're going to rush and it's going to cause problems, right? So if an organisation rushes the process or does not communicate clearly, the financial consequences are now far greater. So in a practical example, if a business makes multiple employees redundant without following the correct processes, the costs of getting that wrong can be substantial, right? So the focus that organizations need to do is make sure they're planning correctly and they're doing it right. So another impact area, and there's more, so there's another important area that is strengthened, and it's also whistleblowing protection. So we all know about whistleblowing, right? And it happens. I've seen it happen and go in, but whistleblowing protection, particularly in relation to sexual harassment. So reporting sexual harassment is now explicitly protected under the whistleblowing law, and this is a significant shift because it changes how cases must be handled. So it's not just about complaining about sexual harassment, it's actually now saying that sexual harassment comes under the whistleblowing process and procedures. Okay, so previously a complaint about sexual harassment or harassment might have been treated purely as an internal HR matter. Now, this is where it gets interesting. If mishandled, it can become a protected disclosure cause with legal implications. So, for example, if an employee reports inappropriate behaviour and then is treated unfairly as a result, this could lead to a whistleblowing claim. So this will raises the importance of handling complaints properly, investigating thoroughly, and ensuring that there is no retaliation from either side. So I think on this side as well, we've got to understand that the sexual harassment process changed back in 2024, 25, I think. I think it was 24 because it was reviewed in October 25. And now we're coming into 26. So there's a big thing around sexual harassment and things like that. But again, it's now coming under the whistleblowing side of it as well. So there's an extra twist to that employees should be aware of. But also as employees, just be aware if they're not following it and you're treated unfairly because of it, because you've reported and it's not being done or anything, then you have a turnaround as well. So as you can start to see, it's not looking good for employers, right? It's all about getting it right. So another change that often goes unnoticed but is critically important is the requirement for detailed holiday and leave record keeping. So this is another thing. So employers are now expected to maintain accurate records of leave, holiday pay, and related data for up to 6 years. Okay, this is about enforceability. So if an employee claims they have not received the correct holiday pay and the employer cannot produce accurate records, the employer is immediately at a disadvantage. So in environments where record keeping has historically been inconsistent, this presents a clear risk. So it reinforces the principle that if something is not documented, it effectively did not happen. So, what can I say about that? Record keeping, people. Record keeping. And what employees must understand, right, and I'm going to raise this point, is employees are very, very good at record keeping. And employers, I'm going to say this, and I hate to say this, but employers think employees are dumb. They don't know. And I get this sometimes where people say, oh, you know, what do they know? They can barely operate a phone. Trust me, with the advances of technology and things out there now, it doesn't matter. And we all move to apps and stuff. And trust me, people document everything. You think they don't. Well, guess what? Employers, you need to wake up and smell the coffee, because employees record everything. And if they can record everything, why can't you? That's the question. So, as you can see, there's lots of things happening. Lots of things. So, as I say, you've got sick pay, you've got parental and paternity rights from day one, you've got the sexual harassment coming under whistleblowing, you've got bereavement leave for parents, where if one dies within the first year of that child being born, it's all changing. And the redundancy consultation, if it's not done correctly, the award, instead of being 90 days, is 180 days. It's doubled. So there's lots of changes, right? It's a lot. So there are also changes to trade union processes as well, so making it easier for unions to gain recognition. So while this may not affect every organisation immediately, it signals a shift towards stronger collective representation. In larger organisations or larger operations, this could lead to more structured engagement, more formal processes, and potentially more organised challenges if issues arise. Now, what I do know about this as well, that the government have still got to confirm this, but the government was looking at either issuing a standard letter from them or a template letter from a company and giving it to them to issue as part of their onboarding process to let employees know that they can join a union. Now, before, nobody has really stopped anybody from joining a union, but now we have to kind of tell them it's your right to join a union and hey, you can join one. Now, some companies don't recognise bargaining agreements and all these kind of things. And I've said this to my employer, and I've said it to many others that I've spoken to. Although you may not recognise a trade union within your organisation, guess what? Get ready for it. You should have all the documentations, processes, procedures in place already. Whether you recognise or don't recognise a union, you should have it, because if it comes into effect that it's mandatory, you have to recognise a union, you're ready instead of scrambling trying to figure out what you need to do. So fall on those companies that didn't plan for this. Yeah, and I've seen through looking at ESG gradings and stuff like that. When you look at ESG and you look at the process and the governance, and it talks about human rights and labour laws, for example, and it talks about bargaining agreements with unions, etc. And people go, oh, well, we don't do that. We don't recognise a union. Whatever. You should create it, and you should have had it created on the basis of saying we don't recognise unions, but if we did, we understand that there would be a bargaining process. And from this is what our bargaining process would be if we acknowledged and represented or acknowledged unions. But currently we don't. So you could have had stuff in place already, but hey, if you're not going to, well, that's not for me to say. But as a consultant to L&D, HR, and in this field, I would say you should have woke up and smelled the coffee, guys, because hello, it's been on the cards for a while, and it makes you a better employer if you have these things in place. Even if you don't use them, you have them and update them just in case they're ever needed. And it's always good to be prepared, right? It's better to be prepared than not prepared. But also, at the same time, so they're just some of the rights that are coming in from the 6th of April, which is Monday, but also from the 7th of April, right the day after. Oh my God, hallelujah, here we go. So at the same time, on the 7th of April, the Fair Work Agency, yes, the Fair Work Agency has been introduced or will be introduced, bringing together enforcement of employment rights into a more centralised system. Dun, dun, dun. Oh yeah, this is where it gets even more fun, guys. And this is all for the employee. So this increases visibility and makes it easier for employees to understand where to go if there are issues with their employers. So, for example, for employers, this means there is less fragmentation and more consistent oversight. So it is also important to recognize that these changes are not happening in isolation. Okay. At the same time, we have seen increases in the national minimum wage. So from Monday, national minimum wage goes up from, I think it's $12.21 to $12.71. The apprentice wage, for example, which I really hate, and I think if you listen to my podcast, you'll know how I feel about this. It's gone from £7.55 to £8. This government is screwed. And yeah, I'm about to send a letter to the people that decide these wages seriously, and give the recommendation of what it should be. They're freaking cuckoo. So anyway, national minimum wage has gone up, which adds further cost pressures for employers when combined with changes like sick pay, increased rights, and stronger enforcement. So the overall impact becomes more significant. So employers are not experiencing these changes individually, but as a part of a wider shift. So when you bring all of this together, what does it mean? Well, the real picture becomes clear. This is not just a legal update. This is a reset in expectations. Organizations are expected to operate with greater consistency, stronger documentation, and better management capability. Oh yes. So before I carry on, I think that there's a key thing to note here as employers and as employees. So employees document everything from your sick days to your holidays to everything. Keep a record of everything. Keep copies of your return to work interviews, so you've got copies of those. They're your right. Under the GDPR, you've got the right to request information on your employee profile and have all that documentation given to you. You can do that. Employers won't like you doing it, but you can do it. But now you've got to keep the records. So, you know, if you're using an app system, you can request that information, you've got it there, but you've got to make sure as an employer, and this goes to employers, wake up and smell the coffee, pull your finger out your asses, start recording everything correctly, do all return to work interviews and various other things. But I'm going to come on to sick pay again in a minute, because there's a couple of extra things I want to add on towards the end. But before I waffle on anymore, in, say, operation environments such as mine in hospitality or FM, or even in your sectors, this becomes particularly important. So these environments where decisions are made quickly, often under pressure, and where inconsistency can easily occur. And it happens with every organization, right? So under the previous system, one of that inconsistencies may have gone unnoticed. So under the new system, it has more likely to be challenged. So employees are more aware of their rights. So let me just make out, these employee rights bills have been going in the press for months and months and months and years, and it's all been talk. There's loads of TikTok, there's loads of Instagram, there's loads of Snapchat. I've seen loads on social media out there about it. So for employers to say, let's hide it from employees, no shit, Sherlock, it's already out in the public, you can't hide it. So no. So it's there, and they know it's there. So employees know exactly what's coming, guys. So as an employer, you can't hide away from it, because we already know, and there's lots of information out there. So, and it's also on ACAS and the government website, and there's lots of HR professionals out there that are posting stuff on social media, and it's getting a lot of traction. Okay. So also enforcement is more structured. So the cost of getting it wrong is higher. So this means organizations must focus on capability, not compliance. So training managers, like myself, well, I'm not training manager, I'm head of department. But training managers, L&D professionals, got to get it right. So it's about simplifying processes and ensuring clarity in expectations becomes essential. So for a training piece, we as L&D practitioners need to go out there and start training everybody the right way. And sometimes let's not overcomplicate it. And I think this, again, before I waffle, this is again another thing. We overcomplicate things. Okay, so I know I've spoken a lot already. I'm going to summarize it to make it very simple in a minute, but we can overcomplicate things, especially in training, and even I know that. So there is also an honest conversation to be had about the tension these changes create. Trust me, there's a lot. So on one hand, they create fairer, more supportive workspaces or places, and on the other, they increase cost, reduce flexibility, and place more pressure on employers. So both of these realities exist at the same time. Not ideal, right? So the outcome will depend on how organizations respond now. So those that invest in leadership, build capability, and operate consistently will adapt and succeed. Those that rely on informal practices or inconsistent management will need to find these changes more challenging, or will find these changes more challenging, I should say. So it's also important to recognize that from April 2026, it's only the beginning. That's right, it's the start of that beginning of the Employment Rights Bill. From the 6th of April 2026, it's the beginning. So further changes are planned throughout the year and into early 2027. So this is including stronger duties around preventing sexual harassment, that's coming in October, changes to flexible working, and reforms to dismissal protections like fire and rehire. So the direction of travel is now becoming more clear, and it is unlikely to reverse back to how it is before it changes. So there is one thing to, if there's one, excuse me, I'm sorry, I had a bit of a coughing fit there, so apologies for that. So if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's that it is not just a legal shift, it's a leadership shift, and organizations will succeed, and that will succeed are not the ones with the best policies, but the ones with the best managers. And the question that sits at the center of all of these things is simple. Are you ready for it as an employer? Probably not. Look, it's been a lot to go through, and I have gone through a lot. So what I will kind of do is just summarize it basically. Okay, so statutory sick pay is now covered from day one. At statutory sick pay, there's no waiting days, and if you're on lower earnings, you're now entitled to that, whereas you wouldn't be before. Okay, day one family rights, so paternity leave is from day one, unpaid parental leave is from day one, so any restrictions being moved there. Bereaved parents parental leave is now there from day one, and it's up to 52 weeks leave if your partner dies within the first year of your child being born. Collective redundancy penalty increase, it increases from 90 days pay to 180 days pay if not fully followed or the process has not been done correctly. Whistleblowing for sexual harassment, it's now classified as a protective disclosure. Holiday and leave record keeping, so you must keep records for up to 6 years, and this includes leave, pay, and anything that is being carried over for holidays. So you must keep clear records of holiday and leave records, and also sickness records as well. So trade union recognition changes, so simplified recognition processes are to be in place. Gender pay gap and menopause action plans as well. This is voluntary from April 26th. I think we didn't cover, but that's also there. The Fair Work Agency launches on the 7th of April, and it's a central enforcement body. And yes, employees can go on a website and they can report you as an organization if they feel they're not being paid correctly. But also, if you don't pay your employees correctly, you will be going on a name and shame list that is published yearly, and they will be doing that. And then the trade union levy removal is from the 1st of April. So the levy removed for unions or employees is coming out, but it's also key to note as well that national minimum wages increased to £12.71, and the statutory rate has increased for statutory sick pay. So just to be aware of that as well. So there's lots of things coming, and trust me, there's quite a bit. But this is a chance to get that understanding, and look, you can go to the ACAS website and look at it as well. You can go to the CIPD website and have a look at the changes. It's out there on all social media networks. But I think from my side on this episode is to say, look, these are the changes that are coming, and employees, we've got a lot more rights, but employers need to kind of wake up and smell the coffee and realise they need to pull their finger out their arse and put things into play. And if your employer says, no, we don't have to pay you from day one, it's not a requirement, it's just the government saying it can be covered from day one, but we still have the right not to pay for 3 days, they're already breaking the law. These are not things that are there for the sake of it, or just there because it's nice to have, but they're there by law, and these are passed by government and the House of Lords, and these are now in law. These are the rights that we're entitled to. So employers have to understand that these are legal rights for employees, and employees, one thing I will say to you is just make sure that before you start throwing things at companies, just check your facts before you do that. But also just remember that don't take advantage of sick pay. If you're sick, you're sick. And I think that's the thing. Like, I think some employers are concerned about sick pay from day one, and I totally understand it. But if you're genuinely sick, you can actually now be sick without dragging your sorry ass into work. Yeah? Because you can be sick and know you're going to get paid, but it's only statutory sick pay for a couple of days. So if you're genuinely sick, you've got that little bit of cover there. Yeah, whereas before, if you were just taking the odd sick day, you're not going to get paid anyway. Fall on you for losing money. But you're going to get something. Okay, so that's kind of a good thing to have. And the parental and family rights thing is there as well. Great. So I think it's a good thing, but I know it's very controversial within the teams I work for and people that I speak to professionally, where they're concerned that it may actually cause a bit of an uproar. So it should. But I think it's better. But it's got to be managed correctly. Employers need to make sure all their managers, team leaders, supervisors are all trained. Operational and regional managers are all trained. Wherever you work, anyone from supervisor upwards should be trained about these. And please, L&D practitioners, I've seen some content that's been pushed out there and it is so overcomplicated. It doesn't need to be. Keep it simple. Yeah, give the key information needed and the key points. Make sure your processes and procedures are clear. Yeah, because if you overcomplicate things, and we all do, it becomes too much. Even if you work in HR and you've got to explain it to your senior leadership team, give it a little bit of a kiss. Keep it simple. Okay? Because if you start overcomplicating things, there's no point. And I've got that right now, which will be another episode around the apprenticeship reform and what they've just done. And a lot of it can be confusing with the information out there, and you sit there and go, what? But when you dumb it down, it works out better. I'm not saying we have to dumb everything down, but let's just keep it simple, okay? But guys, look, there's a lot to take in here, and I know there is. So go back and listen to this. Go to the ACAS website and have a look. But as I say, statutory sick pay from day one. Paternity and unpaid parental is from day one. Bereavement for parental is now a 52-week break, but that's covered from day one. Redundancy consultation, if not done correctly, could cost a company not 90 days but 180 days pay now. And then also trade unions as well are not recognised, but you need to be aware of that, and there'll be more around trade unions, etc. So all these things are changing, as I say. So go and have a look, do a little bit of research. ACAS, as I say, ACAS and CIPD have got some really good materials and really good reading articles out there. They're probably the best two, and also the government website as well, gov.uk. Take a look at that one. They're the three that I would recommend if you want to look at anything, find anything out. Yes, I know ChatGPT is great for that, but sometimes you just want to clarify things because it's brought, even I checked through ChatGPT and it's brought some things forward early that are not actually there yet. They're coming a bit later on. So have a look, get yourself up to date. As employers, if you're not already up to date, where have you been for the last several months? Pull your finger out your ass, because there's been lots of webinars. and lots of talk around this, so you should have been ready by now. And now updating processes and procedures are another one. But one thing before I do go is I do want to mention something that employers may be bringing in, and that is the Bradford factor. Now, the Bradford factor is all around about the sickness. Okay, and this is key to know, I think, because I think from what I can see out there, more employers are going to be using the Bradford factor. So what is the Bradford factor? Now, the Bradford factor relates to sickness, okay, and absence of leave. So the Bradford factor is a human resources formula used to measure employees' unplanned absences, weighting short, frequent or unplanned absences as a more disruptive than long-term sickness leave. So it was developed in the 1980s, and it calculates a score that looks at kind of what outpack or what is actually needed for the process. Okay, so does it trigger a letter of concern, an investigation, those kind of things. So some of the things to be aware of as an employer who may be using it, or an employee, which is good for you to know, is the formula is the number of absences times 2 times the total days absent, and that gives you a Bradford factor. So you've got different scores. So there is, it can vary by company, but the common trigger points are 0 to 50 is a low risk, so minimum action is required. 50 to 100 could trigger for informal or internal monitoring. 100 to 200 score could trigger a formal investigation, and a 200 plus is potential trigger for a formal disciplinary action. So when you're looking at it, the formulas are there, and it's, you know, there are some pros and cons, and what the pros are is it provides an objective, consistent way to identify absence patterns and helps reduce unnecessary duvet days, as they call it. And the cons is it is often criticised for being blind to context. It can unfairly penalise employees with chronic illnesses like diabetes or caring responsibilities or long-term health conditions, which should be taken into consideration for this. So some organisations like Unison urge, it encourages, but I can't even say the word, presenteeism. Where employees come to work while sick to avoid a high score, potentially spreading illnesses to others. I may have said that wrong, that word, so please forgive me. My dyslexia kicks in. So what it does is it's a tool that could be used by employers, so employees be aware of the Bradford factor. So if I give you an example, let me give you an example. So if, say for example, how do they work out the calculation? And you're thinking, well, how would they work it out? So imagine an employee has the following sick record over the last year. So January was 2 days, and that was flu. March was 1 day, and that was a migraine. June was 1 day, and that was a dental emergency. And then September was 3 days due to food poisoning. So step 1 is to count the number of spells or the number of instances. So each separate occasion they were off counts as 1 spell, regardless of how long it lasted. So in that, there are 4 separate spells in this example. So now we need to add up the number of days. So the total number of days that they've had off altogether in those 4 spells of absences is 7. Okay. So this is now where we need to, work out the calculation of the formula. So the formula is the number of spells twice times the days. So for the sequence of absences or spells, that's 4 times 4, because you have to times the number of spells by 2. So 4 times 4 is 16. And then you multiply it by the days, which is 17. So 16 times 7 gives us 112. So that would be the Bradford factor. Okay, so when you're looking at that, that could trigger where you'd go, okay, well, that's the Bradford factor is 112, so that's an informal discussion or monitoring that would fall under. Yeah, so that's how you're working it out. So you're taking the different occasions. So if it's 4, then you times by 4. If it was 6, you times 6 by 6. If it was 7, it's 7 times 7. And then you times whatever that result is by the number of days, and that gives you your factor. Okay, and that's how they work it out. So it's important to make sure that you are working, that you make sure that you are aware of this, because employers are going to start using it and say, okay, well, let's use a Bradford factor on this one. What's your Bradford factor score? But the downfall of this one is employers may use it incorrectly, or may introduce it, and then it flags up a whole load of issues where suddenly there's lots of potential for discrimination. So if you get to, say, for example, one company might do this, right? So for example, one company could go, okay, well, let's use the scale provided by Bright HR, and their scales go 0 to 50 is no action considered, and they're a low to normal level of absences. If you have a score of 51 to 200, that's an informal discussion or monitoring. If it was 201 to 400 score, it's a formal warning, verbal or written. If it was 401 to 600, it's a final written warning. And if it's over 600, it's a potential grounds for dismissal. So the biggest key on this one is for employers to start recording the different types of spells of absences, because that's the key thing. And then obviously the number of days is obviously the number of days, but there's going to be lots of things around this. So employees, please be aware of the Bradford factor that is coming and how it works. Employers, if you're going to use it the right way. And you could use it as a point of reference to monitor sickness, but it could trigger a lot of potential formal warnings, written warnings, and potential grounds for dismissals, and you could end up with no staff. So be very careful. Obviously, things under mental health, long-term illnesses, disabilities, tread carefully. Consult a HR expert or a HR advisory service to make sure you're doing the right things, and don't jump the gun. And for all HR experts, don't rely on ChatGPT to decide your outcome for your employee, because it would not hold up in a court of law, in a tribunal court. So beware of that. So I know I've kind of waffled on about there. It's a bit longer than I expected on this one, because I didn't think I'd add in the Bradford factor, but I thought I'd add it in anyway. So guys, look, thank you very much for listening. These are the changes that are coming from April for employees and employers. Guys, it's more for the employees rather than the employer, but the employer needs to think more effectively and needs to think a bit more about the employees' health and well-beings. Just make sure that we're doing the right things. Yes, it's going to increase costs, we know that, but if you look after your staff well, you don't overload them, you don't turn them into burnout, you'll be absolutely fine. Do I see that there's going to be a massive uptake on sick pay, statutory sick pay from day one? No, I don't think so. Although I can see it from a different angle for statutory sick pay, being if you are unemployed but you don't want to work, but you've gone to work, you can get statutory sick pay from day one. You take your first day, you go sick on the first day, the employer's still going to have to pay you, right? Because you're sick from day one. That's going to cause a problem, and that's probably for another episode to look at. But yeah, I don't foresee there being overuse of sick pay. It's just an extra protection for an employee. If they do go sick, they're getting something. If not a full day pay, they're getting something. So there we have it, guys. That's what I think, or want to be honest about this conversation, is around the changes. They're coming thick and fast. If anyone wants to reach out and have a discussion around it, or the Bradford factor and everything, please let me know. It's a big thing that's happening. So employers need to be aware. Employers and employees, I should say, need to be aware. So yeah, changes are afoot, Watson. Changes are afoot. But anyway, guys, look, thanks for listening. Always remember, if you think someone else might like this, please share it with them. I know it's probably this is a bit longer than normal. This is about a 40-50 minute podcast, but hey, it's important things, right? You need to know these things, and I'm just going to say it. So yes, so guys, please share and like this podcast. Don't forget, you can listen to this wherever you get your podcast from, and listen to previous episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you listen. Guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. I hope you'd enjoy it, and I'll catch you on the next episode.